An exciting story of redemption, love, passion, and new beginnings. She was a virgin at 23, never touched by any man, until she was kissed by the most dangerous millionaire in the city. What seemed like coincidence actually concealed a dirty game, old secrets, and a forbidden passion that could destroy them both. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised. If you like love stories and romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The sound of high heels echoed through the marble corridor like small hammer strikes, marking the accelerated rhythm of a life that Amber Lawrence had never truly chosen to live. It was 7:40 on a grey Monday morning in Chicago, and she already carried in her arms a stack of case files that weighed more than her own expectations. The Martinez, Silva & Associates law firm occupied 3 entire floors of one of the most imposing buildings in the LaSalle Street area, and Amber knew every inch of those cold corridors like she knew the lines of her own palm. 23 years. Old. That's what the mirror showed her every morning when she brushed her brown hair with almost military discipline, tying every rebellious strand in a bun that never dared to become disheveled during working hours. 23 years of an existence so carefully controlled that sometimes she wondered if she was really alive or just functioning, like a well-oiled gear in a machine much larger than herself. Her mother always said that women like them couldn't afford the luxury of dreaming big. Martha Lawrence had raised her daughter alone after her father disappeared one afternoon, taking with him not only what little money they had, but also all the confidence the woman had once placed in the world. Since then, life had been reduced to clear rules. Work hard, don't draw attention, don't provoke, don't desire. Especially don't desire. Amber grew up believing that desire was a mark of weakness, something dangerous that transformed sensible women into vulnerable creatures, ready to be abandoned and humiliated. At 16, when her school friends were already talking about stolen kisses and daring hands, she kept her distance, observing with a mixture of curiosity and terror. At 18, when she entered law school with a full scholarship earned through sleepless nights, she realized she had become almost invisible to the opposite sex, and that seemed safe to her. Now 5 years later, graduated in law but working as a legal assistant because opportunities for someone like her were scarce, Amber had become accustomed to invisibility. She wore clothes that were too discreet, makeup that was too subtle, smiles that were too contained. It was as if she had learned the art of not fully existing, occupying only the necessary space to fulfill her functions and disappear. The apartment she shared with her mother in Lincoln Park was small, clean, quiet. 2 women who had learned to live with their own shadows, sharing economical meals and dreams stored in drawers that never opened. Martha worked as a seamstress for a women's clothing factory, spending nights hunched over the old sewing machine that groaned like a wounded animal, and Amber pretended not to notice the yellowed papers her mother hid in a shoebox on top of the wardrobe. Old documents, letters from lawyers, lawsuits that never amounted to anything. "It's better not to mess with what doesn't concern you," Martha always muttered when Amber asked about those papers. Some battles aren't ours to fight. But Amber felt there was something more there, something her mother carried like a poorly healed wound. Sometimes in the sleepless early hours, she would hear Martha crying softly in the kitchen, leafing through old documents under the weak light of the fluorescent lamp. These were moments when the daughter pretended to sleep, respecting the silent pain that was never shared. That Monday, Amber arrived at the office 15 minutes early, as she always did. The coffee was ready, the desks organized, the computers turned on. She liked those moments of absolute silence when she could still pretend that the day would be different. Dr. Martinez would arrive at 9 o'clock sharp, grumpy, and demanding. Dr. Silva would appear half an hour later, always impeccable and distant. The interns would spread across the floors like worker ants, carrying stacks of paper and desperate expressions. And she, Amber, would again be the efficient shadow who knew all the procedure codes, who never made mistakes, who never missed work, who never complained, the perfect assistant who earned little, expected less, and was content to be useful. The first sign that day would be different came with Dr. Martinez, who entered the office gesturing nervously at his cell phone. "What do you mean they lost?" "The case file? This is unacceptable. Those documents are worth millions." Amber raised her eyes from the computer, trying not to show curiosity. Dr. Martinez rarely lost his composure, and seeing him like this, sweating coldly on a winter morning, awakened a strange uneasiness in her. "Amber." He hung up the phone and approached her with quick steps. "I need you to go up to the Valentine and Partners office, 32nd floor. There's an envelope that was delivered by mistake in our name. It's urgent." The name Valentine and Partners echoed in Amber's mind like a distant bell. She had heard of that firm, of course. Everyone who worked in the legal field in Chicago knew the company's reputation: ruthless, wealthy, powerful. They occupied the highest floors of the building, a region Amber had never visited, inhabited by people she only knew through the social columns of newspapers. "But Dr. Martinez, I don't have authorization to—" "Today you do." He extended a sealed folder. "Deliver this personally, and bring back the envelope that's with them. Don't accept excuses." Amber took the folder with trembling hands. There was something in his urgency that made her nervous, as if she were about to enter dangerous territory without fully understanding the risks. The elevator that led to the upper floors was different from the ones she was used to using. 132, with mirrors and dark wood, with golden buttons and almost inaudible ambient music. As she rode up, Amber observed her reflection multiplied infinitely, and for the first time in a long time wondered what people saw when they looked at her. A woman too serious for her age, a pretty young woman who hid behind plain clothes, or simply someone who had learned not to be seen. The 32nd floor was a world apart. The corridor extended in straight, elegant lines, covered in light, marble and artwork that Amber recognized from art history classes in college. The doors were smoked glass, and through them she could see spacious rooms, men in impeccable suits, women in high heels, who walked with the confidence of those who never doubted their own worth. The receptionist, a stunning brunette in her 30s, looked at Amber with that kind of quick assessment that elegant people make when they want to measure the importance of who stands before them. "May I help you?" "I've come to pick up an envelope that was delivered by mistake to the Martinez, Silva and Associates office, and to deliver this document." Amber extended the folder, trying to keep her voice firm. The receptionist leafed through some papers on a golden clipboard. "Ah, yes, the envelope is with Mr. Nicholas Valentine. He's in a meeting, but should be out at any moment. You can wait." "Over there." Amber headed to the indicated sofa, a cream leather piece that seemed to have cost more than her annual salary. She sat on the edge, with the folder pressed against her chest, trying not to look as out of place as she felt. Around her, lawyers moved with that controlled rush of successful professionals, speaking on the phone in English, carrying Italian leather folders, exuding an expensive perfume that Amber would never be able to identify. That's when she saw him for the first time. Nicholas Valentine came out of one of the meeting rooms accompanied by 3 middle-aged men, all smiling and satisfied as if they had just closed $1 million deal. He was younger than Amber imagined. He must have been about 30, perhaps a little less, but there was something in his posture that conveyed absolute authority. Tall, slim, with dark hair combed back, and a suit that probably cost more than the Lawrence family car. But it was the eyes that caught her off guard. Dark eyes, almost black, that seemed capable of seeing through people, of measuring their worth in a glance. Eyes that never smiled, even when the mouth curved in a political smile. He said goodbye to the men with firm handshakes and greetings, in French. Amber noticed that he spoke the language with natural fluency, like someone who had grown up between 2 languages. When he turned to leave, his eyes met hers for an instant. A brief moment, almost accidental, but enough to make Amber's heart race in a way she couldn't explain. "Mr. Valentine," the receptionist approached him. "This young lady has come to pick up the envelope that was delivered by mistake from the Martinez office." Nicholas stopped. He turned slowly to Amber, who rose from the sofa with awkward movements, still holding the folder against her chest like a shield. "You're from Martinez?" His voice was deep, controlled, with a slight accent that Amber couldn't identify. "I'm the legal assistant, yes." She extended the folder. "I brought this document and came to pick up the envelope that—" "Come with me." It wasn't an invitation. It was an order given in a low, almost intimate tone, but that admitted no questioning. Nicholas headed for the elevator, and Amber followed him, not quite understanding why her feet seemed to have a will of their own. The elevator closed around them, creating a bubble of silence that made Amber notice for the first time her own perfume, a simple smell of soap and cheap shampoo that contrasted violently with the sophistication of that environment. She kept her eyes fixed on the numbers that lit up as they ascended, but she felt the weight of his gaze upon her, an almost physical pressure that made her want to shrink. "What's your name?" The question caught her off guard. Amber Lawrence." "Amber." He repeated the name slowly as if he were tasting the flavor of the syllables. "Pretty name. French?" "My grandmother was French, on my mother's side." "And you've worked for Martinez for a long time?" Amber turned to face him, trying to understand the reason for these questions. Up close, she could see that he had a small scar on his left eyebrow and that his eyelashes were longer than hers. There was something disturbing about that proximity, something that made her stomach contract in a strange way. 3 years. "Do you like the work?" It's a job." For the first time, she saw something that could be amusement in his eyes. Diplomatic answer. The elevator stopped on the 35th floor, but Nicholas didn't move to exit. Instead, he extended his hand and pressed the basement button, making the cab descend again. Amber frowned. "Isn't the envelope in your office?" "It is." He took a step closer. "But I wanted to talk to you first." "Talk to me?" Amber's voice came out higher than normal. "About what?" "About you." It was a simple answer, but it left Amber completely lost. Men like Nicholas Valentine didn't talk to women like her. They didn't look, didn't ask names, didn't show interest. There were clear social rules that separated people like them, invisible but insurmountable walls. "I don't understand." "You're different." He moved another step closer, and Amber could smell his perfume, something expensive and masculine that made her think of noble woods and exotic spices. "From the women I know." "How so different?" Nicholas slowly raised his hand, as if he were going to touch her face, but stopped a few centimeters from her skin. Amber felt the heat of the proximity and discovered that she couldn't move away. "You're not trying to impress me. You're not pretending to be someone else. You're not—" He paused, studying her face with an intensity that made her blush. "You're not available." "I don't understand what you mean." "It means you're a mystery." The elevator continued descending, passing the floors as if time had stretched. Amber knew she should say something, do something, break this strange moment. That was building between them. But there was something hypnotic in those dark eyes, something that made her feel as if she were waking from a very long sleep. "I need to get back to work." "Of course," but he didn't move away. "May I ask you something?" Amber nodded, not trusting her own voice. "Have you ever been kissed?" The question hit her like a punch to the stomach. Amber felt her face catch fire, her heart race, her hands get sweaty. It was too intimate a question, too invasive, asked by a man who was practically a stranger. It was the kind of question she should refuse to answer, that should make her indignant and leave immediately. But instead, she just looked at him, speechless, with eyes wide like a child caught in the act. "I thought so." His voice became lower, more intimate. "There's something about you, a purity that's almost tangible." Amber tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. "You don't need to answer." Nicholas moved closer, so close that she could feel the heat of his body, radiating through the expensive suit. "I already know the answer." That's when it happened. Without warning, without permission, without any preparation, Nicholas tilted his head and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss at first, almost respectful, as if he were testing her reaction. But when Amber didn't pull away, because she couldn't pull away, because every muscle in her body had turned to liquid, the kiss deepened. His hands rose to frame her face, his fingers tangling in the loose strands of her rigorously tied bun. Amber had never been kissed. Not even an innocent teenage kiss. Not even a brush of lips without consequence. At 23, she discovered what it meant to have another person so close that it was possible to taste their breath, feel their heartbeat, the almost imperceptible tremor of masculine hands against her skin. When he pulled away, she was trembling, not from cold, not from fear, but from something new and frightening that had awakened inside her. The elevator had stopped in the basement, but neither of them moved to exit. "Why did you do that?" Her voice came out as a whisper. "Because I wanted to." Nicholas looked at her with an intensity that made her feel as if she were naked. "And because you wanted it too." "You don't know me." "No," he agreed. "But I want to." The elevator opened with a metallic sound, breaking the moment. Amber took a step back, pressing the folder against her chest again, trying to regain control over herself. "The envelope," she managed to speak. "I need the envelope." Nicholas pressed the 35th floor button again. Of course, the envelope. During the ascent, they remained silent. But it was a different silence now, charged with a tension that Amber didn't know how to interpret. She could feel his eyes on her, studying every reaction, every movement. It was as if he had discovered something about her that not even she knew existed. In his office, a spacious room with a panoramic view of the city, decorated with minimalist furniture and artwork that Amber recognized from magazines, Nicholas opened a small safe and removed a sealed envelope. "Here it is." He extended the envelope, but when Amber went to take it, he held her hand for a moment longer than necessary. "Amber." "Yes?" "Where do you have lunch?" I bring lunch from home." "Tomorrow, have lunch with me." It wasn't a question, it was again that low, controlled tone that admitted no refusal. Amber looked at him, at the envelope in his hands, at the door of the room that seemed very far away. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because—" She searched for a logical reason, but all she could find was the raw truth. "Because people like me don't have lunch with people like you." "What kind of person do you think I am? Rich, powerful, used to getting everything you want. And what kind of person do you think you are?" The question caught her off guard. Amber realized she had never really stopped to think about this. What was she? A legal assistant, an obedient daughter, a woman who had spent 23 years of her life trying not to draw attention? "Ordinary," she finally said. "There's nothing ordinary about you, Amber Lawrence." He released her hand and she took the envelope, but before she could move away, Nicholas spoke again. "Tomorrow noon, the signature room, on the Magnificent Mile." "I said I can't, and I said you can." He smiled, and for the first time the smile reached his eyes. "I'm used to getting what I want, remember?" Amber left his office in a sort of trance. She descended the floors back to the familiar world of the Martinez office, with the envelope clutched in one hand and the folder in the other, but with the feeling that she had left something important in that spacious room with the panoramic view. The rest of the day passed like a fog. She delivered the envelope to Dr. Martinez, who seemed relieved but offered no explanations. She typed contracts, organized case files, answered phones. She did everything she always did, but with her mind elsewhere. The kiss. She couldn't stop thinking about the kiss, about the way his hands had held her face, how his lips had been firm but gentle at the same time, how her whole body had responded to a touch that lasted only a few seconds. Is this what other women felt? This strange restlessness, this sensation that something had changed forever inside her, this urgent need to touch her own lips, as if she could preserve the memory of that moment. When she arrived home at the end of the day, she found her mother in the kitchen, hunched over the sewing machine as always. "How was work today?" Martha asked without raising her eyes. "Normal," Amber lied, because she didn't know how to explain. What had happened? How to tell her mother that a man like Nicholas Valentine, had kissed her in an elevator? How to explain that he had invited her to lunch and that part of her desperately wanted to accept? "You're different." Martha finally raised her eyes, studying her daughter's face with that sharp perception that only mothers possess. "I'm tired, that's all." Martha returned to work, but Amber noticed she continued to be observed. "Be careful with men who mess with your head, Amber. They never bring anything good." It was as if her mother knew, as if she could see in her daughter's face the invisible marks of that kiss, that invitation, that dangerous promise that Nicholas had planted in her mind. That night, Amber stayed up late, looking at the ceiling, of the small room that she shared with so many memories of a carefully controlled life. She thought of the signature room, which she knew only by name. She thought of the clothes she owned, all too discreet, too cheap for a place like that. She thought of the way Nicholas had said her name, as if he were tasting the flavor of the syllables, and she thought mainly of what it would mean to say yes to a man like him, what it would mean to enter that world of power and sophistication, even if just for an afternoon, what it would mean to discover who she could be beyond the small and invisible woman she had built to protect herself. When she finally managed to fall asleep, she dreamed of elevators that went up and down eternally, of kisses that left her breathless, of dark eyes that saw her in a way she had never been seen before. The next day, she woke up with her heart beating fast, and a decision that had formed somewhere between sleep and wakefulness. At 11:45 in the morning, Amber Lawrence was standing in front of the mirror in the office bathroom, trying to fix her hair with trembling hands, and wondering if she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life, or if, for the first time, she was about to truly live. The E signature room stood on the magnificent mile like a monument to discreet luxury, its wide windows reflecting the elegant movement of a Chicago that Amber knew only from afar. She stopped on the sidewalk in front of the establishment, holding the strap of her small purse so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Gradually, she began to notice the details that separated that world from hers, the women who entered and exited wearing clothes that cost more than her monthly salary, the imported cars parked in double lines, the men who spoke on the phone in languages she didn't recognize. All morning, Amber had changed clothes 3 times. Her modest wardrobe offered few options, and each piece she tried on seemed inadequate for a place like that. Finally, she opted for a simple navy blue dress, the most elegant one she owned, which she had bought 2 years earlier for a cousin's wedding. Low-heeled shoes, also navy blue, that hurt a little, but disguised the nervousness that made her legs tremble. Her hair was loose, a daring concession for someone accustomed to the rigorous bun. She had spent 20 minutes brushing the brown strands until they were smooth and shiny, trying to ignore her mother's voice echoing in her mind. "Loose hair draws too much attention, Amber. Serious women tie their hair back." But at that moment, standing in front of the signature room, Amber didn't want to be serious. For the first time in her life, she wanted to be seen. She wanted to understand what Nicholas Valentine had recognized in her that not even she knew existed. "Do you have a reservation, miss?" The maitre d', a middle-aged man impeccably dressed, approached her as soon as she passed through the revolving door. I'm meeting someone, Nicholas Valentine." The name worked like a magic password. The maitre d's expression immediately transformed, going from professional to reverent. "Of course, miss, Mr. Valentine has already arrived." "Allow me to accompany you." Amber followed the man through the restaurant, trying not to look around too obviously, but absorbing every detail. The well-spaced tables with white linen tablecloths, the waiters who moved with choreographed precision, the low sound of conversations in French, English, Italian. It was a parallel universe, where people like her should never step. Nicholas was seated at a table by the window, leafing through a financial newspaper. He wore a grey suit that seemed to have been sewn directly onto his body, and when he raised his eyes upon seeing her approach, Amber again felt that disturbing impact of dark eyes meeting hers. He stood up to receive her, a chivalrous gesture that made some women at nearby tables look with barely disguised curiosity. Amber noticed the looks, the subtle but cruel assessment that accompanied her presence there, and for a moment wanted to flee. "You came," Nicholas said, and there was something in his voice that suggested genuine surprise. "You thought I wouldn't come. I thought perhaps your courage might fail at the last minute." He pulled out the chair for her to sit, a simple gesture that for Amber had the weight of an initiation ritual. "I'm happy to have been wrong." The waiter appeared immediately, as if he had been waiting for an invisible signal. Nicholas ordered a bottle of wine in French, and Amber noticed that he spoke the language with the same naturalness with which he spoke English. When the waiter moved away, she finally managed to relax a little in her chair. "Do you always talk like that?" she asked. "Like what?" "Like you know exactly what will happen. Like you control everything." Nicholas smiled, and again it was that smile that reached his eyes. "It's a professional deformation. In my work, those who don't control the situation end up being controlled by it." "And isn't that tiring? Having to always be in command?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. Nicholas was silent for a few seconds, studying her face with that disturbing intensity. "No one has ever asked me that before. Maybe because the people you know also like to control everything. Maybe." He leaned slightly over the table. "And you? Do you like to control things?" Amber thought about the life she had built, the rigid rules she followed, the way every aspect of her existence was carefully planned to avoid surprises, risks, disappointments. "I like to know what to expect," she answered honestly. "Then we're both out of our comfort zone today." The wine arrived, and Amber watched Nicholas go through the tasting ritual with the naturalness of someone who had been born doing that. When the waiter filled the glasses, she took hers carefully, trying to remember the little she knew about etiquette in elegant restaurants. "To your courage," Nicholas raised his glass. "To your persistence." They toasted, and Amber tasted the wine. It was different from anything she had ever tried, complex and smooth at the same time, leaving a taste that developed slowly in her mouth. "Did you like it?" "It's different." "Different good or different bad?" "Just different." Amber took another sip, feeling the alcohol warm her empty stomach. "Like all of this." "All of what?" "This place. This situation. You." Nicholas leaned forward more, interested. "I'm different from what?" Amber realized she had drunk too much too quickly, because the words were coming out more easily than they should. "From any man I've ever known. But to be honest, I haven't known many men." "Why not?" "Because I don't—" She stopped, realizing the dangerous territory the conversation was heading toward. "Because I'm shy. I don't believe it's just shyness." "What do you think it is then?" "Fear." The word hung between them like a delicate accusation. Amber felt her face heat up, not just from the wine but from the acute perception that he had identified something she herself rarely admitted. Fear of what? Of living, of feeling, of discovering who you really are when you're not hiding. "Don't hide." "No," Nicholas gestured subtly toward her. "This outfit, for example. Beautiful but chosen not to draw attention. The loose hair, which I imagine is rare for you. The way you sit, taking up as little space as possible in the chair. Everything about you screams, 'Don't see me.'" Amber felt exposed, as if he could read through her like through transparent glass. And what's wrong with that? Nothing, except that it's a waste. A waste of what? Of you. The waiter returned to take their orders. Nicholas chose something from the menu in Italian, and Amber, completely lost among dishes she didn't recognize, simply said, "The same for me." When they were alone again, the weight of the previous conversation still hung between them. "May I ask something?" Amber said, feeling braver thanks to the wine. "Of course. Why me? Why did you invite me to lunch?" Nicholas was silent for so long that she began to wonder if the question had been inappropriate. When he finally answered, it was with an honesty that caught her off guard. "Because when you walked into my office yesterday, it was as if the air had changed. There's something about you that I can't decipher, and that's unprecedented for me." "Unprecedented how?" "I'm used to understanding people quickly, In my work, it's a matter of survival to know what game each person is playing, what their motivations are, their weaknesses, their prices. He rotated the wine glass between his fingers. But you seem not to be playing any game. Because I'm not. Exactly. And that's disturbing. Disturbing why? Because it makes me question things I took for granted. The food arrived, and Amber discovered that Nicholas had ordered a shrimp risotto that smelled like paradise. She had never eaten anything like it, each forkful revealing flavors she didn't know existed. Nicholas observed her reactions with poorly disguised amusement. First time? How do you know? By your eyes, they light up with each discovery. Amber stopped eating, self-conscious. Do I look like a country girl? You look like someone who can still be surprised by good things. That's rare. In your world, I imagine it is. In my world, people pretend to be bored with everything, even when they're experiencing something for the first time. It's a matter of status to appear blasé. And you, do you pretend to be bored? Nicholas considered the question while eating. Usually, yes, but not today. Why is today different? Because I'm seeing everything through your eyes, and that makes everything new. Amber felt her chest tighten in a strange way. There was something in the way he spoke, a sincerity that contrasted with the image of a cold and calculating man she had formed. Tell me about yourself, she said impulsively. What do you want to know? Anything, everything. Nicholas laughed, a low and genuine sound. That's a very broad question. Then start wherever you want. He was silent for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. I was born in Paris, but came to the United States when I was 8. My father wanted to expand the family business to North America. Business in what? Corporate law, investments, acquisitions, things that make rich people richer. There was a note of bitterness in his voice that Amber couldn't ignore. You don't like what you do? It's complicated. Nicholas took a sip of wine. It's what was always expected of me. I inherited the company, the responsibilities, the expectations. Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I had chosen another path. What path? Any path. Literature, perhaps, or music. I always wanted to learn piano. Why didn't you learn? Because pianists don't run corporate empires. Amber realized there were more layers to this man than she had imagined. Beneath the unshakable confidence and absolute control, there was someone who had also sacrificed dreams in the name of expectations. And you, he asked, did you always want to be a lawyer? I always wanted to have a profession that would give me independence. Law seemed safe. Safe how? A job that would always exist. That would allow me to take care of my mother when she got older. And your dreams. What did you want to be when you were a child? Amber smiled, remembering old fantasies. A writer. I wrote terrible stories about princesses who saved dragons instead of being saved by them. Princesses who saved dragons. Nicholas seemed genuinely interested. Why? Because I thought it was unfair that they waited for someone to solve their problems. In my stories, they learned to use swords and went out into the world having adventures. And what happened to those stories? I grew up, Amber shrugged. I discovered that the real world has no place for adventurous princesses. Maybe you just haven't found the right place yet. There was something in the way he said this that made Amber wonder if he was talking about stories or about herself. Dessert arrived without her noticing, a petit gâteau that melted in her mouth like a sweet promise. The restaurant had gradually emptied, and Amber realized they had spent more than 2 hours talking. Time had dissolved in a way she had never experienced before. I have to get back to work, she said, looking at her watch in panic. Dr. Martinez will understand if you're a little late. How do you... Amber stopped. How do you know he'll understand? Nicholas hesitated for a fraction of a second, but it was enough for her to notice. You know each other. All the lawyers in the city know each other, Amber. It's a small circle. But there was something in his answer that didn't sound completely true. Amber felt a twinge of discomfort. as if she had missed some important detail. "I really need to go." "Of course," Nicholas signaled to the waiter. "But first, may I ask you something?" "Depends on what it is." "Have dinner with me tomorrow night." Amber felt her heart race again. "Nicholas, before you say no, listen to me. It won't be like today, it won't be an interrogation, just two people who met and want to get to know each other better. I don't have clothes for dining in places like this. Then we'll dine somewhere, else wherever you want. I don't know places." "I know." He leaned across the table, taking her hand delicately. "Trust me." It was a simple thing to ask, but Amber realized that trust was something she had learned to ration carefully. She looked at his hand covering hers, larger, warmer, with a ring that she hadn't noticed before. "Are you married?" Nicholas followed, her gaze to the ring. "I was. She died 3 years ago." "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "There's no way for you to know." "I don't talk about it." "Were you happy?" "We were compatible." He paused, as if carefully choosing his words. "It was a marriage arranged by the families. She was a good woman, but we never really connected." Amber felt something twist in her stomach. Arranged. In our world, marriages are rarely about love. They're about mergers, about uniting fortunes, about maintaining status. What a sad world. "It's the world I was born into." Nicholas gently squeezed her hand. "But that doesn't mean I have to continue living by the same rules." There was an intensity in his eyes that made Amber feel as if she were standing on the edge of a precipice. Part of her wanted to retreat, return to the safety of the known world. But another part, a part that had been awakening since the kiss in the elevator, wanted to jump. "All right," she heard her own voice say. "I'll have dinner with you tomorrow." The smile that spread across Nicholas's face was different from all she had seen before. It was genuine, almost vulnerable, as if she had just given him something much more valuable than a simple acceptance. "I'll pick you up at 8. How do you know where I live?" "It's in the employee file at the Martinez office." Again, that feeling that something wasn't completely right. But before Amber could investigate further, Nicholas stood up and walked around the table to pull out her chair. "I'll take you back to work." "You don't need to." "I insist." His car was parked in front of the restaurant, an elegant black sedan that cost more than the apartment where Amber lived. The driver, a discreet middle-aged man, jumped out to open the door for her. During the journey to the office, they spoke little. Amber looked out the window watching the city pass by, but her mind was busy processing everything that had happened in the last few hours. The lunch had been like entering a book, a life that wasn't hers, but that for a few hours she had been invited to experience. Amber. Nicholas called her attention when they stopped in front of the building where she worked. "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me what it's like to feel curious about someone." Before she could respond, he leaned in and kissed her again. A brief, almost chaste kiss, but one that left her with the feeling that the world had tilted, slightly on its axis. Amber got out of the car in silence and entered the building without looking back. But while waiting for the elevator, she could feel his gaze through the dark glass of the car, a presence that seemed to have become a permanent part of her perception. At the office, Dr. Martinez barely commented on her lateness. In fact, he seemed strangely solicitous, asking if she had had a good lunch, if she needed anything. It was unprecedented behavior for a man who generally barely noticed her existence. "Dr. Martinez." Amber approached his desk at the end of the afternoon. "May I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you know Nicholas Valentine personally?" The question made Dr. Martinez stop writing and look at her with an expression that mixed surprise and something that could be concern. "Why do you ask?" "Just curiosity. During lunch he mentioned that you knew each other." "Lunch?" Dr. Martinez frowned. "What lunch?" Amber realized she had revealed more than she intended. He invited me to lunch, to thank me for going to pick up the envelope." "Amber." Dr. Martinez leaned back in his chair, studying her with attention. You need to be very careful with men like Nicholas Valentine. Why? Because they don't do anything without a reason, and the reason is rarely beneficial for people who aren't from their world. Are you saying he has ulterior motives? I'm saying that men like him always have ulterior motives. It's how they were educated. It's how they survive. Amber felt a strange chill in her stomach. But you didn't answer my question. Do you know each other? Dr. Martinez hesitated. Our companies have had business in common a few years ago. What kind of business? Nothing that concerns you. His voice became firmer. Amber, promise me you'll be careful. Nicholas Valentine is a dangerous man. Dangerous how? Dangerous because he's capable of doing anything to get what he wants. And when people like us cross paths with people like him, we usually end up hurt. Amber left the office that afternoon with her mind buzzing with doubts and questions. Dr. Martinez's words echoed in her head, mixing with memories of lunch, with the sensation of Nicholas's lips on hers, with the promise of the next night's dinner. On the train home, she tried to logically analyze everything that had happened. A man like Nicholas Valentine had no reason to be interested in someone like her, not unless there was something more behind all that attention. But then she remembered the way he had talked about piano, about literature, about the world he had inherited without choosing. She remembered the sincerity in his eyes when he said she made him question his certainties. Could it be that Dr. Martinez was wrong? That not all powerful men were cold calculators, incapable of genuine feelings? Or was she being naive, allowing herself to be seduced by a man who saw in her just a piece in a game she still didn't understand? That night, Amber stayed up late again, but this time it wasn't dreams that kept her awake. It was the growing perception that regardless of Nicholas's motivations, something fundamental had changed within her. For the first time in her life, she had felt seen, desired, interesting. She had discovered that she was capable of conversations that lasted hours, that she could make a sophisticated man laugh, that there existed within her a version of herself she didn't know. And even if it was all a mistake, even if Dr. Martinez was right about the dangers of getting involved with Nicholas Valentine, Amber knew she could no longer go back to being the small and invisible woman she had been on Monday morning. The dinner the following night had become inevitable, not because Nicholas had insisted, but because she needed to discover who this new version of herself was, and she could only do that alongside the man who had awakened her to her own existence. Even if the awakening came with risks, she still couldn't calculate. Amber spent the entire day trying to concentrate on work, but her thoughts constantly drifted to the approaching night. Each time the phone rang, her heart accelerated, imagining it might be Nicholas cancelling dinner. Each time someone passed through the hallway, she raised her eyes expecting to see him appear with that smile that left her without motor coordination. Dr. Martinez observed her with poorly disguised concern, making comments about how she seemed distracted and different. But Amber barely registered the comments. Her mind was occupied with more urgent questions: what to wear for dinner with a man like Nicholas, how to act, what to say. During lunch, which she barely touched, she called the only close friend she had, Carly, a college classmate who worked in a boutique at Michigan Avenue Mall. "You're kidding me!" Carly shouted from the other end of the line when Amber explained the situation. "Nicholas Valentine? The Nicholas Valentine from the social columns? The hot millionaire heir?" "You know him?" "Know of him. He's bought things here a few times. For gifts, I imagine. Amber, do you have any idea who this man is?" "I'm beginning to." "And you're having dinner with him tonight?" "I am." "Good Lord." Carly paused. "Listen, you need clothes. Come here now, during your lunch hour. I'll find you something suitable." "Carly, I don't have money for—" "Leave it to me. I have some pieces that arrived with small defects. Nothing a quick stitch won't fix." An hour later, Amber was in the boutique's fitting room, looking at herself in the mirror with an expression of total incredulity. The dress Carly had chosen was a deep emerald green, with a discreet but elegant neckline, and a fit that embraced her curves in a way she had never realized she possessed. My God, Amber. Carly stood behind her, adjusting the final details. You're beautiful. Why do you hide behind those horrible clothes? Because I don't want to seem what? A woman. Amber looked in the mirror again. The person she saw reflected was someone she didn't completely recognize. The dress enhanced the light color of her eyes, the golden tone of her loose hair, the delicacy of the facial bones she had always considered too common. He'll think I'm trying too hard. He'll think you look stunning. Carly handed her a small gold clutch. And if he doesn't, it's because he doesn't deserve you. Amber returned to the office with a discreet bag containing the dress, the borrowed shoes, and some borrowed courage as well. She spent the rest of the afternoon trying to work, but with each passing hour her nervousness increased. At 5:30 she locked herself in the office bathroom to get ready. She changed clothes with careful movements, redid her makeup following. The tips Carly had whispered, brushed her hair until it shone like silk. When she finally looked in the mirror, she had to breathe deeply several times to believe that elegant woman was really her. At 8 o'clock sharp, Amber was standing in the front of the building where she worked, holding the small gold clutch and trying to control the tremors in her hands. The movement on LaSalle Street was beginning to decrease, offices emptying, the city preparing for the night. Nicholas's car appeared punctually, sliding up to the curb like an elegant shadow. But this time, it was Nicholas himself who got out, to open the door for her, dismissing the driver. When he saw her, he stopped in mid-movement, his eyes widening in an expression of genuine surprise. Amber. There was something in the way he said her name that made all the nervousness worth it. It was a mixture of admiration and something deeper, more dangerous. "Do you like it?" she asked, turning slightly so he could see the dress completely. "Like it?" Nicholas approached, stopping a few centimeters from her. "You look devastating." "Devastating is an exaggeration." "No." He extended his hand to her. "Devastating is the right word. Because you just devastated all my expectations about how this night would be." Amber took his hand, feeling again that electric impact of contact. Nicholas guided her to the car, but before closing the door, he leaned in and whispered in her, "How you have any idea of the effect you're having on me?" She couldn't respond. She only felt the warmth of the words against her skin and realized she was entering even more dangerous territory than she had imagined. "Where are we going for dinner?" she asked when he got in the car and started driving. "A special place." "Special. How?" Nicholas smiled but kept his eyes on the road. "Do you like surprises?" "Depends on the surprise. You'll like this one." They drove in silence for a while, leaving the office district and heading toward a more residential area. Amber watched the streets pass by, trying to guess the destination, until Nicholas stopped in front of an elegant building in Lincoln Park. "Here?" She looked around, not seeing any restaurant. "Here." They entered the building and went up to the top floor. When Nicholas opened the door of the apartment, his penthouse, Amber realized, she found herself in a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Chicago. "You brought me to your home." "I did." Nicholas approached her from behind, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. "I thought you'd prefer a place where we could talk without being observed." "Observed by whom?" "By all the people who were curious about us yesterday. At the signature room." Amber turned to face him. "They were curious?" "Of course they were. A woman like you appearing with a man like me, that generates speculation." "What kind of speculation?" "That you're my new distraction." The word fell between them like a stone in a calm pond. Amber felt something contract in her chest. "Is that what I am, a distraction?" Nicholas studied her for a long moment before answering. "I don't know yet what you are, Amber, but I know you're not a distraction." He moved away, gesturing toward the terrace. "Would you like to see the view before we have dinner?" The terrace was even more impressive than the living room. A spacious area with elegant furniture, carefully arranged plants, and a view of Chicago that took her breath away. The city lights extended as far as the eye could see, creating a golden carpet that pulsed with life. "It's beautiful." "Amber, approached the railing, observing the movement below. "I bought this apartment because of this view." Nicholas positioned himself beside her. "I like being able to see the entire city. It makes me feel like I have some control over it." "You like controlling things. I like understanding things. When you understand how something works, you can predict how it will react. And me? Do you understand me?" Nicholas turned to look at her directly. "You're the first person in a long time that I can't predict." "Does that bother you?" "It should bother me." He moved closer, but it doesn't. On the contrary. There was something in the air between them, an electric tension, that made Amber hyper-aware of his every movement, every breath. When Nicholas extended his hand to touch her face, she didn't pull away. "Amber." "Yes?" "May I ask you an indiscreet question?" She nodded, not trusting her own voice. "Have you ever felt desire?" The question hit her like lightning. Amber felt her face catch fire but couldn't look away from his dark eyes. I don't know." "You don't know?" "I don't know what it would be like, how to recognize it." Nicholas moved closer, so close that she could feel the heat of his body radiating through his elegant suit. "May I show you?" It was a simple question, but one that carried a world of implications. Amber knew she was standing at a crossroads, that her answer would change everything. She knew she should be sensible, cautious, remember Dr. Martinez's warnings. But her body had already decided before her mind. She nodded in an almost imperceptible movement. Nicholas raised his hands, framing her face with a delicacy that contrasted with the intensity of his eyes. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted. She didn't want to. The kiss began softly, exploratory, different from that first impulsive kiss in the elevator. Nicholas seemed to be mapping every contour of her lips, teaching her to respond, to participate. When Amber finally relaxed against him, the kiss deepened. That's when she understood what he had asked about desire. It was that sensation of melting, of wanting more contact, more closeness. It was the way her entire body reacted to his touch, as if every cell had awakened simultaneously. When they separated, Amber was breathing as if she had run a marathon. "So?" Nicholas asked, his voice hoarser than normal. "Do you recognize the feeling?" Amber couldn't answer. She just looked at him, trying to process what had just happened to her body, to her mind, to everything she thought she knew about herself. "Come." Nicholas took her hand. "Let's have dinner before I do something we'll regret." Dinner was served at an intimate table in the living room, illuminated by candles and with a spectacular view as a backdrop. Amber realized that someone had prepared everything in advance. Elaborate dishes, wine already decanted, soft music playing quietly. "You planned all this," she said, impressed by the attention to detail. "I wanted it to be special." "Why?" "Because you deserve special things." Amber sat down, still trying to recover from the kiss on the terrace. There was something different in the air now, an intimacy that didn't exist before, as if they had crossed an invisible line. "Nicholas," she said as he served the wine. "Yes?" "Why me? Really? Don't give me a romantic answer. I want the truth." Nicholas stopped what he was doing and looked at her directly. "The truth?" "The truth." He sat in the chair across from her, rotating the wine glass between his fingers. "The truth is that I don't have a logical answer. The truth is that since I saw you, I can't think of anything else. The truth is that you scare me." "Scare you how?" "Because you make me want things I thought I didn't want anymore. Because you make me question choices I thought had been made a long time ago." "What kind of choices?" Nicholas took a sip of wine before answering. "About how to live, about what's important, about who I want to be." "And who do you want to be?" "Someone who deserves the way you look at me." Amber felt her chest tighten. "How do I look at you?" "As if I were better than I really am." There was a vulnerability in his voice that caught her completely off guard. This wasn't the cold and calculating man everyone described. This was someone lost, questioning himself, perhaps even suffering. "Tell me about your wife," she said impulsively. The question made Nicholas visibly tense. "Why?" "Because I want to understand you, and she was an important part of your life." Nicholas was silent for so long that Amber began to wonder if she had crossed some line. When he finally spoke, it was with a distant voice. Rebecca was perfect, on paper, daughter of an influential family, educated in the best schools, fluent in 4 languages. She knew exactly how to be the wife of a man like me. But, we married out of obligation, not love. We were friends at best, 2 strangers sharing an elegant and empty life. Did you love her? I thought so at first, or maybe I wanted to love her, but real love. He looked at Amber. No, I never truly loved anyone. How did she die? Car accident. She was returning from a trip with friends. Nicholas took another sip of wine. When I received the news, my first feeling was guilt. Guilt why? Because I felt relieved. The confession hung between them like a dark cloud. Amber could see the pain in his eyes, the guilt he still carried. You feel guilty for feeling relieved, she said gently. What kind of man feels relieved at his wife's death? A man who was trapped in a life he didn't choose. Nicholas looked at her with surprise. You don't judge me? No. Amber extended her hand across the table, touching his fingers. I think you already judge yourself enough for 2. It was the first time she had touched him on her own initiative, and the gesture seemed to break something inside him. Nicholas turned his hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. How do you manage to do this? He asked. Do what? Make me feel like it's possible to be different. Amber didn't know how to respond to that. She didn't know if it was possible for people like them to be different, if they could really escape the worlds they had inherited. Tell me about your mother, Nicholas said, changing the subject. Amber tensed slightly. What do you want to know? Anything. Are you close? It's just the 2 of us. Amber chose her words carefully. She works a lot, always has. She raised me alone after my father left the scene. He abandoned you? When I was 5 years old. He simply disappeared one afternoon. It must have been difficult for you too. It was, especially for her. Amber hesitated, remembering the yellowed papers her mother hid. I think he took more than just himself when he left. What do you mean? Documents, money that was hers. I don't really know the details, but I know my mother was left with debts that weren't hers. Nicholas became very quiet, studying her, face with renewed intensity. She never tried to recover what was hers. She tried, for years, but lawyers are expensive and we never... Amber stopped, realizing the delicate terrain. We never had the means to fight against important people. Important. People? The people who kept what was hers. Businessmen, rich people. Amber took a sip of wine. People from your world. There was a strange tension at the table now. Nicholas seemed to be processing information, connecting dots that Amber couldn't see. What is your mother's full name? He asked too casually. Martha Lawrence. Why? Curiosity. Lawrence isn't a common last name. It was my French grandmother's last name. And your father? What was his last name? Amber frowned. Why so many questions about my family? Sorry. Nicholas smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Professional deformation. Lawyers ask a lot of questions. But Amber had the feeling that there was something more behind the questions. Something that Nicholas knew and she didn't. Nicholas, she said slowly, are you sure we didn't know each other before? You and my family. Why do you ask? Because you seem to know more about us than you should. Because Dr. Martinez acted strangely when I mentioned your name. Because... She stopped, trying to organize her thoughts. Because all this seems too good to be true. Nicholas was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, there was a gravity in his voice that alarmed her. Amber, there are things about my life, about my family, that are complicated. Complicated how? Like old business deals that sometimes resurface. Like decisions made before I was born that still have consequences today. What kind of consequences? The kind that can hurt innocent people. Amber felt a chill in her stomach. Are you trying to tell me something? I'm trying to tell you that getting involved with me can be dangerous. Dangerous how? Dangerous because there are people who would use you to get to me. Dangerous because my family has enemies. And my family? Are we your enemies? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Nicholas didn't answer immediately, and his silence was more revealing than any word. We are, aren't we? Amber stood up from the chair, her heart racing. That's why you approached me. That's why all this interest. Amber, it's not that simple. It's not simple. She laughed, a bitter sound. A man like you takes an interest in a woman like me, and I should believe it's coincidence. The feelings are real. Nicholas stood up too, trying to approach her. What I feel for you is real. But it started as a game. It started as... He stopped, clearly struggling with the words. It started as something I thought I could control. And now? Now it's completely out of control. Amber looked at him at the elegant apartment, at the table set with such care, and felt as if she were waking from a beautiful dream that was revealing itself to be a nightmare. I need to leave. Amber, let me explain. Explain what? How? You used me? How I'm just a piece in your chess game? You're not a piece. Nicholas approached, taking her hands. You're the only real thing that's happened in my life. Amber looked at him, at the dark eyes that seemed genuinely desperate, and for a moment wanted to believe the feelings were real, that everything she had discovered about herself in the last few days was valid. But then she remembered Dr. Martinez's warnings, the strange questions about her family, the persistent feeling that she was being manipulated. If it's real, she said slowly, then tell me the whole truth now. Nicholas released her, running his hands through his hair in an expression of defeat. The truth is that my family owes money to your mother. A lot of money. What do you mean? 20 years ago, my father made some questionable decisions. He involved investors in a company that didn't exist, diverted funds, forged documents. Your mother was one of the investors. Amber felt her legs weaken. My mother invested with your father. She and her husband, they lost everything, their house, their savings, everything. And you knew this when you met me. I knew. And you still sought me out. I did. Amber sat heavily in the nearest armchair, trying to process the information. Why? Because your mother is suing our company, trying to recover what's hers, and I thought... He stopped, clearly embarrassed. You thought that if you seduced me, she would drop the lawsuit. I thought maybe we could reach an agreement. An agreement. Amber repeated the words as if they were poisonous. And I would be what? Guarantee? Bargaining chip? Initially, yes. The brutal honesty of the response was like a slap in the face. Amber stood up again, heading for the door. Amber, wait. Why? To hear more lies. To hear that I changed my mind, that I'm not going to use you anymore. How can I believe you? Because I'm telling you the truth now. Because I could have continued lying, but I couldn't. Amber stopped at the door, without turning to look at him. And now? What happens now? Now I'll do what's right. I'll return the money to your mother, with interest. Everything she lost because of my family. And us? Us? His voice faltered. I don't know if there can be an us after this. Amber finally turned to look at him. She was crying, silent tears that ran down her face without her noticing. You're right, she said, with a voice that came out firmer than she felt. There can't be. And she left the apartment, leaving behind the emerald green dress, the kisses on the terrace, and the version of herself she had discovered in the arms of a man who had just revealed himself to be everything she should have, feared from the beginning. Amber arrived home at 11 o'clock, with eyes swollen from crying in the taxi and a heart shattered in a way she didn't know was possible. The small apartment in Lincoln Park had never seemed so welcoming and so suffocating. At the same time, Martha was awake in the kitchen, as she always was when her daughter was late, sewing under the yellowed light of the lamp. Amber? Her mother raised her eyes, and immediately her expression changed upon seeing her daughter's state. What happened? Amber couldn't answer. She simply collapsed in the chair across from her mother and began to cry again, unable to stop. Martha immediately stood up, enveloping her daughter in an embrace that smelled of sewing thread and the cheap perfume she had worn for years. "My love, tell me what happened." Between sobs, Amber told everything. The kiss in the elevator, the lunch at the signature room, the dinner in the penthouse, the feelings she had discovered, and finally the devastating truth about who Nicholas really was and why he had approached her. Martha listened to everything in silence, stroking her daughter's hair with mechanical movements. When Amber finished speaking, there was a long silence in the small kitchen. "Mom." Amber raised her face, looking for surprise or indignation in her mother's eyes. But what she found was resignation. "You already knew." It wasn't a question. Martha sighed deeply. "I didn't know about you and him, but I knew that the Valentines were trying to find a way to make me drop the lawsuit." "Why did you never tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to carry that burden, because I thought I could protect you by keeping it away from our life." Amber pulled away from her mother's embrace, feeling a new and different anger growing inside her. "Protect me by lying. Protect you by not involving you in a war that began before you were born. But I ended up being involved anyway, in a much worse way." Martha lowered her eyes, clearly feeling guilty. "Tell me everything, Amber, from the beginning. What exactly happened between you and your father?" It was then that Amber heard for the first time in her life the complete story. How Martha had met Thomas Lawrence at a social event, how he had seemed to be a prosperous and trustworthy businessman, how they had married quickly, and how he had convinced her to invest all the inheritance she had received from her French mother in a company that promised extraordinary returns. The company was called Valentine and Associates. Martha said, her voice laden with bitterness. Henry Valentine, Nicholas's father, was the principal partner. They took the money from dozens of investors and simply disappeared with everything. "And my father?" "Your father was the man who recruited the investors, the handsome and trustworthy face who convinced people like me to hand over their savings." Martha looked at her own hands. "When everything collapsed, he vanished. He took the documents that could help me prove my innocence and disappeared." Amber felt as if the ground had opened beneath her feet. "So I'm the daughter of a criminal. You're the daughter of a man who made terrible choices. But that doesn't define who you are." "Yes, it does." Amber stood up, walking around the small kitchen like a caged animal. "It does, because now I understand why Nicholas sought me out. It wasn't just about the money. It was about him, too. My father." "Amber, he must be looking for my father. Through me. He must think I know where he is, that I have information that can help his family." "Do you know where your father is?" "No!" Amber shouted and then lowered her voice. "No, I never knew. I never wanted to know." Martha approached her daughter again. "Amber, listen. Nicholas Valentine is not his father. From what I've heard, he's different." "Different?" Amber laughed bitterly. "Mom, he used me. He seduced me knowing exactly who I was, what my family represented to his. That's exactly what his father would do. But he told you the truth, only because I suspected, only because he had no choice." Amber spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling of her room and trying to understand how her life had completely transformed in just 3 days. On Monday, she was an invisible woman, secure in her small and predictable routine. On Thursday, she discovered herself in love with a man who had lied to her from the first moment. But the worst part wasn't the worst part was that, even knowing everything, part of her still missed him, still remembered the taste of his kisses, the way he made her feel seen, desired, important. The next morning, Amber arrived at the office 40 minutes late and, with an iron determination to pretend nothing had changed, she wore her discreet clothes again, her hair tied in the rigorous bun, the minimal makeup. It was as if she were trying to erase the woman she had discovered herself to be in the last few days. Dr. Martinez greeted her with poorly disguised relief. "Amber, I thought you wouldn't come today." "Why wouldn't I come?" "I thought that maybe, after last night's dinner." Amber stopped organizing the papers on her desk. "How do you know about the dinner?" Dr. Martinez seemed to realize he had said too much. "I received a call this morning." "From whom?" "From Nicholas Valentine." Amber felt her stomach turn. "He called here. Why?" "To say that we've reached an agreement about your mother's lawsuit." "What agreement?" "Amber, sit down." She sat, but every muscle in her body was tense. "Nicholas Valentine has offered to pay your mother's debt in full, with 20 years' interest. We're talking about almost $5 million. Amber was silent, processing the information. $5 million. It was more money than she had dreamed of having in her entire life. In exchange for what? Nothing. No conditions. That doesn't make sense. It does if he's trying to redeem himself. Amber stood up abruptly. "He can't buy me." "Amber, he's not trying to buy you. He's trying to do what's right." "Doing what's right." She laughed bitterly. "Dr. Martinez, he used me. He seduced me knowing exactly who I was. And now he wants to pay my mother to look like a hero? Maybe he really regrets it. Or maybe he's trying to clear his conscience." Dr. Martinez studied her face for a long moment. "Amber, may I ask you something?" "What? Do you love him?" The question hit her like a punch to the stomach. Amber opened her mouth to say no, to deny any feelings for Nicholas Valentine, but the words wouldn't come out. "It doesn't matter what I feel," she finally said. "Not after what he did." "Yes, it does. Because if you love him, maybe you should consider that people can change. That they can do the right thing, even if for the wrong reasons at first." Amber spent the rest of the morning trying to concentrate on work, but her mind was elsewhere. With each passing minute, she expected Nicholas to appear at the office, to try to talk to her, to force her to confront the confused feelings she was trying to suppress. But he didn't appear. At 2 in the afternoon, she received a call at the office. "Amber Lawrence?" "Yes." "My name is Camilla Beaumont. I need to speak with you." The name meant nothing to Amber, but there was something in the woman's voice that immediately put her on alert. "About what?" "About Nicholas Valentine. Can we meet?" Amber hesitated. The last thing she wanted was to get even more involved in that situation, but curiosity was stronger. "Where?" "Morrison Coffee on Wabash Avenue. In an hour." Morrison Coffee was one of those small, intimate places that Amber had never visited, frequented by artists, intellectuals, and people who considered themselves more interesting than average. When she arrived, she found a woman in her 30s, sitting at a table in the back, elegant in a way that seemed natural, with blonde hair tied in a French bun and expensive but discreet clothes. "Amber." The woman stood up, extending her hand. "Camilla Beaumont, thank you for coming." Amber sat across from her, trying to decipher who this woman was and what she wanted. "Do you know me?" Amber asked. "Not personally, but I know who you are." "And who am I?" Camilla smiled, but it was a cold smile. Nicholas's new obsession. Amber felt a twinge of something that could be jealousy. "You know Nicholas?" "I know him." Camilla took a sip of coffee. "We're engaged." The words fell between them like a bomb. Amber felt as if she had been slapped in the face. Engaged. For 3 years, since shortly after Rebecca's death. Amber tried to process the information, but her mind seemed to have stopped functioning. He didn't mention he was engaged. I imagine there are many things he didn't mention. "Why are you telling me this?" Camilla leaned over the table, studying Amber's face with a predatory intensity. "Because I want you to understand the situation you've gotten yourself into." "What situation?" "You think you're special to him? That you're different from the others?" "I don't think anything," Amber lied. "Lie?" Camilla smiled again. "I can see in your eyes that you believe there's something real between you." Amber didn't respond, but Camilla continued. "Let me clarify some things for you, dear. Nicholas Valentine is a man who collects women like others collect artwork. He amuses himself with them for a while and then moves on to the next. If you're engaged, why aren't you worried? Because I know he always comes back to me. Always. Does he love you? Camilla laughed, a crystalline and cruel sound. Love? Amber, we don't get married for love. We marry for convenience, for status, for merging assets. Love is a fantasy for people like you. People like me. People who don't understand how the world really works. Amber felt anger growing inside her. And how does the world work, Camilla? The world works with power, money, and influence. Nicholas may amuse himself with you for a while, may even think he feels something, but in the end he always chooses what's best for him, and what's best for him is me. You seem very confident. I'm confident because I've known Nicholas for 20 years. We grew up together, studied together, built a life together. You're just a temporary distraction. Amber stood up, no longer able to stay in that place. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to stay away from him. And if I don't want to? Camilla also stood up, but maintained her elegant composure. Then you'll discover in the most painful way possible that men like Nicholas aren't made for women like you. Amber left the coffee shop with her mind racing. Every word from Camilla echoed in her head, mixing with the revelations of the previous night and creating an even more devastating picture of the situation she found herself in. Engaged. Nicholas had been engaged for 3 years and hadn't mentioned it. Not once had he spoken of Camilla, of wedding plans, of a future that didn't include Amber. But then she remembered how he had talked about his dead wife, about the loneliness he carried, about the way he looked at her as if she were the only real thing in his life. Could it all be a lie? Could he be that good an actor? When she arrived home that night, she found her mother in the kitchen, but this time she wasn't sewing. She was sitting at the table with a pile of documents in front of her. "What is this?" Amber asked. Nicholas Valentine's lawyer was here today. Amber felt her heart race. Here, at home. He brought these papers. The agreement you mentioned. Amber sat next to her mother, leafing through the documents. It was all true. Nicholas had offered to pay not only the original investment value, but also compound interest for 20 years, moral damages, and an additional amount to compensate for the suffering caused. It's a lot of money, Amber. It is. Enough money for us to buy a house, for you to get a master's degree, for us to have a different life. Amber looked at her mother, seeing for the first time in years an expression of genuine hope on her face. You want to accept. I want you to have the opportunities I never had, even if that money comes from him. Martha took her daughter's hand. Amber, this money was ours from the beginning. He's just returning what his family stole. But the timing, after everything that happened between us, maybe the timing is perfect. Maybe he's trying to do the right thing. Or maybe he's trying to buy my forgiveness. And if he is, can't you forgive him? Amber looked at the documents, at Nicholas's signature at the bottom of each page, at the amount that would change their lives forever. I don't know if I can trust him again. I'm not asking you to trust him. I'm asking you to trust yourself. What do you mean? I mean that you're not the same woman you were on Monday. In these few days, you've discovered who you can be when you're not hiding. No one can take that away from you. Amber stayed up all night again, but this time she wasn't just thinking about Nicholas. She was thinking about the woman she had become, the strength she had discovered, the way she had confronted Camilla that afternoon without allowing herself to be intimidated. Camilla was right about one thing. Amber didn't fully understand how the world of the rich and powerful worked, but she was beginning to learn. And she was beginning to realize that perhaps she didn't need to understand their rules to play the game. The next morning, she made a decision. She called Nicholas's office and scheduled a meeting for the afternoon, not to talk about feelings or forgiveness, to talk about business. If Nicholas Valentine wanted to play a game, Amber had decided it was time to learn the rules, and maybe to change them. When she arrived at the 35th floor that afternoon, wearing the same navy blue dress she had worn on the first day, but with a completely different posture, Amber was no longer the scared and insecure woman Nicholas had kissed in the elevator. She was someone who had discovered she had power, and she was ready to use it. The secretary received her with professional courtesy and led her to Nicholas's office. When the door opened, Amber saw that he wasn't alone. Camilla was seated in one of the armchairs in front of his desk, elegant and in control, as if that were her natural territory. "Amber," Nicholas stood up immediately, surprise clear on his face. "I didn't expect—" "Of course you didn't expect." Amber entered the room with firm steps, completely ignoring Camilla. "I came to talk about the agreement." "What agreement?" Camilla asked with a sweet voice that didn't disguise her irritation. "The agreement your fiancé made with my family." Amber turned to look directly at Camilla. "Oh, you didn't know? Nicholas is paying $5 million to my mother, a considerable amount even for someone with his resources." Camilla looked at Nicholas with an expression that could kill. "$5 million? Why?" "Because my family owes that money to her family," Nicholas responded, without taking his eyes off Amber. "And because it's the right thing to do." "The right thing?" Camilla stood up clearly, furious. "Nicholas, we talked about this. You said you had found a way to resolve the situation without—" "Without what?" Amber asked, interested. "Without paying. Without taking responsibility. Without letting yourself be manipulated by a—" Camilla stopped, realizing she was revealing too much. "By a what, Camilla?" Amber approached her, feeling a new power coursing through her veins. "By an ordinary woman? By someone who doesn't understand the rules of your world?" "Amber," Nicholas intervened, trying to calm the situation. "No." Amber raised her hand, stopping him. "Let her finish. I want to hear what she has to say about women like me." Camilla looked at Amber with barely disguised hatred. "Women like you think they can enter our world and change everything. They think love is enough to overcome differences in class, education, reality. And it's not. It's not. At most you serve to amuse us for a while, but in the end we always return to where we belong." Amber smiled, and it was a smile that resembled Nicholas's, cold, calculating, dangerous. "You know what I think, Camilla? I think you're afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that Nicholas will discover there's something better than a life of convenience. Afraid that he'll realize he doesn't need to settle for a loveless marriage just to maintain status." "I'm not afraid of you." "You should be." Amber moved closer. "Because I have nothing to lose, and people who have nothing to lose are the most dangerous of all." The tension in the room was palpable. Nicholas observed the confrontation between the two women with an expression that mixed fascination and horror. "Enough," he said finally. "Camilla, you can go." "Nicholas." "Go, Camilla, now." Camilla looked at him, then at Amber, and finally left the room, slamming the door. When they were alone, Amber turned to Nicholas. "So," she said casually, "your fiancé seems interesting." "Amber, I can explain." "Can you? How can you explain that you forgot to mention you're engaged? How can you explain that while you were telling me I was the only real thing in your life, you had a woman waiting for you at home?" "Camilla and I don't live together. We never have." "What difference does that make?" "It makes all the difference," Nicholas approached her. "Amber, I don't love Camilla, I never have. But you're going to marry her anyway. That was the plan before I met you." "And now?" Nicholas stopped right in front of her, looking directly into her eyes. "Now everything has changed." "Changed? How?" "Now I know I can't marry a woman I don't love when I've discovered what it is to truly love." Amber felt her heart race but forced herself to maintain her composure. "You think you love me? I know I love you. Even after everything that's happened, even knowing I can't trust you anymore? Especially because of that." Nicholas extended his hand, touching her face delicately. "Because you confronted me. Because you forced me to be honest. Because you didn't accept crumbs." Amber closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the familiar touch, fighting against the desire to give in again. "Nicholas." She opened her eyes. "I came here to accept your agreement." "Great. but not for the reasons you imagine. What reasons? Amber moved away from him, walking to the window. I came to accept because my mother deserves that money, because your family really does owe it to her, but mainly because I want you to understand something. What? That I don't need you. That I can have a good, complete life without you. In it. The words seemed to physically hurt him. And is that what you want, a life without me? Amber turned to look at him, seeing the pain in the dark eyes she had already learned to decipher. What I want doesn't matter. What matters is that now I know I can choose. And you choose to stay away from me. I choose not to be anyone's. Second option, I choose not to accept crumbs from a man who is divided between two worlds. I cancelled the engagement. The declaration caught her completely off guard. What? This morning, before you arrived. I spoke with Camilla and with the families. The wedding won't happen. Amber felt the ground move beneath her feet. Why? Because I can't marry a woman when I love another. Nicholas. Because you showed me it's possible to live without fear. Because you taught me that some things are worth fighting for, even if it means losing everything else. Amber looked at him, at the devastating sincerity in his eyes, and felt all her defenses falter. And if you regret it, and if you discover we're not compatible, and if we discover we're perfect for each other. Nicholas approached her again, but this time he didn't try to touch her. Amber, I can't change what I did. I can't change the fact that I started all this for the wrong reasons, but I can promise you that from now on, everything I do will be for the right reasons. How can I believe you? Because I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me. Amber looked at him, at the man who had destroyed her certainties and rebuilt her courage, and realized she was standing at a crossroads that would define the rest of her life. She could choose the safety of money and distance, or she could choose the risk of love and trust. For the first time in her life, she discovered she knew exactly which choice she wanted to make, even if it was the most frightening of all. Amber was silent for so long that Nicholas began to wonder if she had stopped breathing. She stood in front of the window, looking at the city stretching below, but he knew her mind was far away, weighing every word he had said, every promise he had made. Amber, he said gently. I'm thinking, she replied without turning around. About what? About how many times in life we have the chance to choose who we want to be. Nicholas approached, stopping behind her, so close that he could smell the delicate perfume she wore. And who do you want to be? Amber finally turned, and when her eyes met his, Nicholas saw something that wasn't there before. Determination, courage, a quiet strength that made him realize the woman before him had irrevocably changed. I want to be someone who isn't afraid to fight for what she believes in. And what do you believe in? I believe that you cancelled the engagement before I arrived here. I believe your feelings are real. She paused. But I also believe that's not enough. Nicholas felt his heart race. What do you mean? I mean that if we're going to try this, if we're really going to try to be together, it will be my way. What way? Amber approached him, and Nicholas was surprised to realize she had lost that timidity that characterized her. There was something new in her movements, a confidence that completely transformed her. First, we go slowly. No grand romantic declarations, no promises of forever. We get to know each other for real, without games, without manipulations. I accept. Second, I won't hide. I won't pretend to be someone I'm not to fit into your world. If you want me, you'll have to accept me exactly as I am. I already accept you. You don't know me well enough to say that, Amber smiled, but it was a challenging smile. Third, we share everything. Decisions, responsibilities, power. I won't be a pretty accessory in your life. Nicholas smiled too, impressed by her transformation. Do you realize you're negotiating with me as if this were a business contract? I am, because I learned from you that the important things in life need clear rules. And if I don't accept your conditions? Amber moved closer, so close that their bodies almost touched. Then you'll discover that the woman you think you love doesn't really exist, because the real Amber doesn't accept crumbs. Nicholas looked at her for a long moment, seeing for the first time not the fragile and insecure woman he had seduced, but an equal, someone who could challenge him, question him, force him to be better. "I accept your conditions," he said. "All of them. Even knowing that means you'll lose a lot of control over the situation?" Especially because of that. Amber studied his face, looking for signs of lies or manipulation. When she found none, she finally relaxed. "Then let's try." Nicholas extended his hand to her. "May I kiss you? To seal the deal?" "You may." Amber took his hand. "But not in the office. There are too many bad memories here." "Where then?" "Take me to meet the real Nicholas. Not the executive, not the heir. The man who wanted to play piano." An hour later, they were in a small music store in downtown. Nicholas had changed from his suit to jeans and a simple t-shirt, and Amber realized that like this, he seemed years younger, less intimidating. "Why here?" she asked as he tested a digital piano. "Because I come here sometimes when I need to. Remember who I was before I became who I am." Nicholas sat on the bench and began to play a simple but beautiful melody. Amber watched him, fascinated by the way his hands moved over the keys, by the expression of peace that spread across his face. "It's beautiful," she said when he finished. "What music is that?" "It's not anyone's. I composed it." "You compose?" "Sometimes, when I have time." Nicholas stood up, gesturing for her to sit. "Your turn." "I don't know how to play piano." "I'll teach you." Amber sat on the bench, and Nicholas positioned himself behind her, placing his hands over hers and guiding her fingers over the keys. It was intimate in a different way from the kisses they had shared, softer, more connected. "Like this," he whispered in her ear, guiding her through a simple scale. "Do you feel how each note has its own weight?" Amber concentrated on the sensation of the keys under her fingers, on the warmth of Nicholas's hands covering hers, on the sound they were creating together. "It's like learning a new language," she said. "It's exactly that, a language that has no lies." They spent 2 hours in the store, with Nicholas teaching Amber to play basic melodies and telling stories about his secret passion for music. It was the first time Amber had seen him completely relaxed, without masks, without roles to play. When they left the store, it was already getting dark. Nicholas took her to dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Little Italy, far from the elegant places where he normally appeared. "Why did you choose this place?" Amber asked, looking around at the simple but welcoming environment. "Because here no one knows us. Here we can just be Nicholas and Amber." During dinner they talked. About music, about books, about dreams they had kept in drawers. Amber told him about the stories she wrote as a child, and Nicholas talked about how he used to imagine a different life, away from family expectations. "If you could do anything in life," Amber asked, "what would it be?" Nicholas thought for a moment. "Teach music to children. I think it would be liberating." "Why don't you do it?" "Because I have responsibilities, a company, employees, investors. And if you found a way to have both?" "What do you mean?" Amber leaned over the table. "What if you could use your company to create music schools or social programs? Transform part of the wealth into something that really matters." Nicholas looked at her with surprise. "Are you suggesting I transform a corporation into what?" "Into something that makes a difference, something you can be proud to lead." That would be revolutionary. Maybe it's time for a revolution. It was a conversation that Nicholas had never had with anyone. Camilla, for example, had never questioned his business or suggested changes. She accepted the status quo because she benefited from it. But Amber was proposing something completely different, that he use his power to create positive changes. "Would you do that?" he asked. "If you were in my place?" "If I were in your place, I would try to find a way to sleep well at night, knowing my work helps people instead of just enriching those who are already rich." When they returned to Nicholas's apartment, the atmosphere between them had changed again. There was a new intimacy, built on honesty and mutual discovery. "May I stay?" Amber asked when he stopped in front of the building where she lived. "Stay where?" "With you. Tonight." Nicholas looked at her, surprised. Are you sure? I am. But, she hesitated. I never. You know I never. I know. He touched her face delicately. And it only happens if you want it. When you want it. I want to. I'm just nervous. You don't need to be nervous with me. In the apartment, Nicholas opened a bottle of wine and put on soft music. Amber explored the space as if it were the first time she was there, noticing details she had missed on her first visit, old photographs on a shelf, music books piled on a table, a guitar leaning against a wall. You play guitar too? A little. Nicholas approached her. I taught myself when I was a teenager. Play something for me. Nicholas picked up the guitar and sat on the sofa. He began to play a melancholy song, singing softly in French. Amber sat beside him, hypnotized by his voice, by the melody that seemed to tell a story of love and loss. What song is that? Jacques Brel, Ne me quitte pas, Don't Leave Me. It's sad. It's about a man begging the woman he loves not to go away. Amber looked at him directly. Are you afraid I'll go away? I am. Nicholas put the guitar aside. I'm afraid of waking up and finding out that all this was a dream. It wasn't a dream. Sometimes it seems impossible that you're real. Amber moved closer to him on the sofa. Do you want to feel how real I am? She took his hand and placed it over her heart. Nicholas could feel the accelerated beats through her thin blouse. Do you feel it? It's real. I'm real. This is real. Nicholas pulled her closer, kissing her with a tenderness that contrasted with the urgency of their previous kisses. Amber responded, allowing herself to relax against him, allowing herself to feel. Amber, he whispered against her lips. Yes, I love you. They were simple words, but they carried the weight of everything they had been through together. Amber looked into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability, the sincerity, the fear of being rejected. I love you too, she said, surprising herself with the ease with which the words came out. They kissed again, and this time Amber took the initiative, exploring, discovering, allowing herself to be guided by the desire she had learned to recognize. Are you sure? Nicholas asked, when she began to unbutton his shirt. I'm sure. We can stop at any time. I know, but I don't want to stop. What happened next was different from anything Amber had imagined about her first time. Nicholas was patient, gentle, attentive to her every reaction. He taught her to touch and be touched, to give and receive pleasure, to surrender completely without losing herself. When they finally rested, entwined in his bed, Amber felt as if she had discovered a new version of herself, a brave, passionate, complete version. How do you feel? Nicholas asked, stroking her hair. Different. More myself. Explain better. As if I had finally found all the pieces that were missing. Nicholas kissed her on the forehead. I understand. I feel the same way. They stayed up late, talking about everything and nothing, discovering small details about each other, building the foundation of a real relationship. The next morning, Amber woke to the sound of the phone ringing insistently. Nicholas answered with a still, sleepy voice. Hello? Amber could hear an agitated voice on the other end of the line, but couldn't understand the words. What? Nicholas sat up in bed, immediately alert. When? The conversation continued for a few minutes, with Nicholas asking short questions, and receiving answers he clearly didn't like. I understand, yes, I'll be there in an hour. He hung up and turned to Amber, who was watching him with concern. What happened? Problems at the company. It seems someone leaked information about the cancellation of my engagement to the press. Amber felt her stomach sink. What kind of information? The worst kind. They're saying I cancelled the wedding to be with a lower-class woman who's manipulating me for money. Camilla. Probably. Nicholas got up, starting to dress quickly. She knows journalists, has contacts in the media, and she's furious. What does this mean for us? Nicholas stopped dressing and looked at her. It means our private life is going to become public spectacle. It means they're going to investigate everything about you, about your family, about our history. Amber felt a chill in her stomach. They'll discover about my father. Probably. And about the agreement with my mother. That too. Amber sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process the implications. They'll say I set it all up, that I seduced you to get the money. They'll try, but it doesn't matter what they say. We know the truth. Nicholas, you don't understand. Amber stood up, starting to dress too. In their world, the truth doesn't matter. Only what appears to be true matters. So what are you suggesting? Amber stopped, looking at him with a determination that surprised him. I'm suggesting that we control the narrative before it controls us. How? By telling our story first, in our own way. An hour later, they were in Nicholas's office, where chaos had set in. Journalists were constantly calling, investors were demanding explanations, and the public relations team was in total panic. Amber observed everything with fascination and horror. It was like watching a destruction machine in operation, designed to annihilate reputations and lives. Mr. Valentine, the public relations assistant, approached him. We need an official statement, something to calm the investors and counter the narrative. What kind of statement? Denying the relationship, saying it was just an insignificant affair. Amber felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. She looked at Nicholas, waiting for his response. No, he said firmly. What do you mean, no? The assistant seemed confused. I'm not going to deny my relationship with Amber. I'm not going to pretend she isn't important. But Mr. Valentine, the investors will have to accept that my personal life is not their business. Amber approached him. Nicholas, maybe you should consider... No, he turned to her. Last night you made me a proposal. You said you wanted to share everything with me, including the difficult decisions. This is one of them. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we do exactly what you said, that we control the narrative. How? Nicholas smiled, and it was that dangerous smile that Amber had learned to recognize. By giving a press conference, telling our complete story, about what my family did to yours, about how we met, about how we fell in love despite everything. That would be revolutionary. Yes. Nicholas took her hands. Would you do this with me? Amber looked around, the office, at the people in panic, at the chaos Camilla had created, at the chance to transform a destructive situation into something constructive. I would, she said, but with one condition. Which one? We both speak, as equals, not you defending me, but both of us telling our version. I accept. And we promise to be completely honest, about everything. Even about the parts that make us look imperfect. Especially about those parts. 3 hours later, Amber was sitting next to Nicholas in a conference room packed with journalists, cameras, and reporters. She wore a simple but elegant dress, borrowed again from Carly, and had styled her hair in a way that made her look professional but approachable. Good afternoon, Nicholas began. Thank you for coming. I know there's a lot of speculation about my personal and professional life, so we decided to clarify things directly. We decided, Amber added, immediately establishing that she was there as an equal, not as an accessory. For the next hour they told their story. Nicholas explained about his family's history, about his father's questionable decisions, about the money they owed Amber's mother. Amber talked about how they met, about the agreement, about how she discovered the truth. So it's true that the relationship began as manipulation? A journalist asked. It began that way, Nicholas admitted, and that's something I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. But it evolved into something real, Amber added. And sometimes the truest things are born from the most unexpected places. Aren't you afraid people will think you're in this relationship for the money? Another reporter asked. Amber smiled. I'm afraid of many things, but not of people who judge me without knowing me. Because I know who I am and why I'm here. "And why are you here?" the journalist insisted. "Because I love a man who's trying to be better than he was taught to be, and because I believe everyone deserves a second chance." When the interview ended, Amber knew they had created a precedent, not just for themselves, but for how people from different worlds could find common ground. "How do you think it went?" Nicholas asked as they left the building. "Honest. Brave." Amber took his hand. "Real. And now?" "Now we live with the consequences, and we discover if our love is strong enough to survive what's coming." They didn't know yet, but Camilla was already planning her next move. And this time, she wasn't just interested in getting Nicholas back. She was interested in completely destroying the woman who had dared to take the place she considered rightfully hers. The war was just beginning. The press conference had the effect of a bomb on Chicago society. For 3 days, Amber and Nicholas were the topic of every newspaper, blog, and television program. Opinions were violently divided. Some saw them as a brave couple who had chosen love over social conventions, others as opportunists who were manipulating public opinion. Amber discovered what it meant to be a public figure. Photographers followed her on the street. Reporters called the office. Strangers recognized her on the subway. It was both exciting and terrifying to be seen by so many people. "Do you regret it?" Nicholas asked one morning, as they leafed through the newspapers in his apartment. "The interview? No." Amber took a sip of coffee. "The consequences? Sometimes." "What kind of consequences?" "My mother received 3 calls yesterday from journalists wanting details about my father. Dr. Martinez is considering firing me because the attention is affecting the office." Nicholas put down the newspaper. "He can't fire you because of this." "Yes, he can, and he probably should. It's not fair to the other employees." "Amber, if you lose your job because of me, it won't be because of you. It will be because of choices we made together." It was true, but that didn't make the situation any less complicated. Amber felt as if she were living in a bubble that could burst at any moment, forcing her to return to a reality where she no longer had a place. That's when the invitation arrived. A week after the interview, Amber found an elegant envelope on her desk at the office. Expensive paper, perfect calligraphy, no identified sender. Inside, an invitation printed in golden letters. "The Beaumont Foundation has the honor of inviting you to the charity masquerade ball for Chicago's underprivileged children. Saturday, November 22nd at 8 p.m., Palmer House, Hilton, Chicago. Dress formal, mask required." Amber read the invitation 3 times, feeling a strange chill in her stomach. Beaumont, Camilla's last name. It couldn't be a coincidence. "Dr. Martinez," she approached her boss. "Do you know the Beaumont Foundation?" Dr. Martinez raised his eyes from the documents. "I know it by name. It's a charity organization run by the Beaumont family." "Why do you ask?" Amber showed him the invitation. Dr. Martinez read it and frowned. "Amber, this doesn't seem like a good idea to me." "Why not?" "Because Camilla Beaumont probably didn't invite you to a friendly party." "I know that." "And you're still considering going?" Amber folded the invitation and put it in her purse. "I am." "Why?" "Because if I don't go, she'll think she can intimidate me, and I can't allow that." That night, Amber showed the invitation to Nicholas. His reaction was immediate and predictable. "You're not going." "What do you mean I'm not going?" "Because it's obviously a trap. Camilla is planning something." "I know she's planning something, but that doesn't mean I'm going to hide." Nicholas got up from the sofa, pacing around the room like a caged animal. "Amber, you don't understand how these people function. They're capable of anything to destroy those who threaten their interests." "And you think I'm not capable of defending myself?" "I think you underestimate how cruel they can be." Amber approached him, forcing him to stop pacing. "Nicholas, if we're going to be together, you need to trust that I can fight my own battles." "This isn't your battle. It's mine. It's ours. From the moment we decided to make our story public." Nicholas looked at her for a long moment, clearly struggling between the desire to protect her and respect for her autonomy. If you go, I'll go with you. No. If you go, it will look like. I need protection. I'll go alone. Amber, trust me. 2 days later, Amber was at the most expensive beauty salon she could find, spending an absurd amount of the money she had saved to transform herself into a version of herself that could compete in Camilla's territory. The dress, a vintage, black model found in a luxury thrift store, embraced her body like a second skin, elegant without being vulgar, sophisticated without being ostentatious. The mask, handmade by a Venetian artisan that a friend of Carly's knew, was a work of art in black lace and crystals. When she looked in the mirror, Amber barely recognized the woman she saw reflected. She was no longer the invisible legal assistant, nor even the insecure woman who had fallen in love with Nicholas. She was someone new, someone who had learned to use her strength as a weapon. When she arrived at the Palmer House Hilton, it was transformed into a dark fairy tale setting. Golden lights, white flowers, classical music played by a full orchestra. The guests were exactly what Amber expected: Chicago's elite, politicians, businessmen, people whose names she recognized from newspapers. Amber entered the main hall with her head held high, aware of the looks that followed her. Some people recognized her despite the mask. After all, her photo had been in every newspaper for a week. Amber Lawrence. A familiar voice made her turn. Camilla was approaching, stunning, in a gold dress that probably cost more than Amber's annual salary. Her mask was an elaborate piece of gold and feathers that made her eyes even more penetrating. Camilla, thank you for the invitation. I had to get to know better the woman who managed to make Nicholas Valentine lose his head. Lose his head? Cancel. A 3-year engagement. Expose family business. Risk everything for... Camilla gestured vaguely in Amber's direction. For this. For love. Camilla laughed, a crystalline and cold sound. Please, men like Nicholas don't love women like you. They amuse themselves with you. You seem very confident about what Nicholas feels or doesn't feel. I've known Nicholas since we were 12. I know exactly how he works. Amber smiled, feeling a strange calm settle over her. Maybe you knew the 12-year-old Nicholas, but you don't know the man he's become. Camilla studied her for a moment, as if reassessing her opponent. Do you know what irritates me most about you? Camilla finally said. What? That you really believe you can win. And you really believe you can intimidate me. I don't need to intimidate you. I just need to show everyone here who you really are. And who am I? The daughter of a criminal who's using Nicholas to get revenge on the family that destroyed yours. Amber felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. How do you know about my father? Darling, I know everything about your family, including some details that I imagine not even Nicholas knows. Camilla made an almost imperceptible signal, and immediately Amber found herself surrounded by 3 men in suits. Gentlemen, allow me to introduce Amber Lawrence, the daughter of Thomas Beaumont. Beaumont? One of the men frowned. I thought her last name was Lawrence. Lawrence was her mother's maiden name, but her father, well, her father was my uncle, Thomas Beaumont. Amber felt the world spin around her. That's not true. Isn't it? Then why did he use fake documents? Why did he change his name when he fled the country? Why have you and your mother never been able to find him? You're lying. Am I? Or did you simply never know the truth about who your father really was? Amber looked around and realized that a crowd had formed, people whispering, pointing, taking photos with cell phones. It was exactly what Camilla wanted, a public scandal that would completely destroy her reputation. You know what's most ironic? Camilla continued, clearly savoring the moment. Amber spent her entire life hating my family for the crimes she thought we had committed against hers, but in reality, the crimes were committed by her own father. No, Amber shook her head. My mother was a victim. Your mother was an accomplice. She knew exactly who Thomas Beaumont was when she married him. She knew that the money they stole would be used to give you a better life. Amber felt her legs weaken. It was too much. Too many revelations, Too many lies and truths mixing in a web she could no longer decipher. And now, Camilla said, raising her voice so everyone could hear, she's trying to do exactly the same thing her father did. Seduce a rich man to steal his family's money. The crowd murmured, clearly fascinated by the drama unfolding before them. Amber looked around, seeing masked faces judging her, considering her guilty by association. Then something clicked in her mind. A piece of the puzzle she had ignored, but now fit perfectly. "You said my father was your uncle," Amber said, her voice growing firmer. "That's right. Which means you always knew who I was." "Of course. And you always knew about the money your family owed mine." Camilla hesitated for a fraction of a second. "That's irrelevant." "Is it irrelevant, or did you orchestrate all of this from the beginning?" "What are you talking about?" Amber moved closer to Camilla, her voice becoming louder, clearer. "I'm talking about the fact that you manipulated Nicholas to approach me. I'm talking about you creating this whole situation to get rid of a legitimate debt." "That's ridiculous." "Is it? Then why didn't you mention we were related when we met? Why didn't you tell Nicholas I was the niece of the man who helped steal investors' money?" The crowd was paying attention now, realizing the narrative was changing. "Because," Amber continued, her voice echoing through the hall, "you wanted Nicholas to seduce me and convince me to make my mother drop the lawsuit. You wanted to use our relationship to cover up your family's crimes. You have no way to prove this." Amber smiled, and it was a smile she had learned from Nicholas. "I don't need to prove it. I just need to ask the right questions." She turned to the crowd. "Does anyone here wonder why the Beaumont Foundation never publishes its financial statements? Why a charity organization refuses external audits?" Camilla went pale. "Amber, you don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? Or maybe I've done my homework." Amber took from her purse a folder she had brought specifically for this moment. "Because you see, I spent the last week investigating the Beaumont Foundation, and I discovered some very interesting things. Like the fact that only 12% of donations actually reach underprivileged children. The rest disappears in administrative costs that include paying the personal debts of the Beaumont family." The crowd murmured, clearly shocked. "Or, like the fact that the foundation is used to launder money from various shell companies controlled by the Valentine and Beaumont families." Amber opened the folder showing documents, including $5 million that were illegally transferred from my mother's account to the foundation 20 years ago. "Where did you get these documents?" Camilla asked, her composure finally cracking. "From an investigative journalist friend who became very interested in our story after the press conference. Funny how transparency can lead to unexpected discoveries." Amber turned to the crowd again. "The truth is that both the Valentine and Beaumont families built their fortunes on fraud, money laundering, and stealing from innocent investors, and when my mother tried to recover what was hers, they created this elaborate scheme to use me against her. But there's one thing they didn't expect." Amber looked directly at Camilla. "That I would fall in love for real, and that Nicholas would, too, and that our love would be strong enough to make us want to expose the truth instead of covering it up." The crowd was completely silent now, absorbed by the drama unfolding. "So here's my proposal," Amber said, her voice echoing through the hall. "Instead of a fake charity ball for a corrupt foundation, how about we use this night for something real? How about we donate all the money raised today to legitimate and audited charity organizations? And how about we use this opportunity to demand transparency from all organizations that claim to work on behalf of the less fortunate?" The applause that followed was deafening. Amber looked at Camilla, who was clearly in panic, and felt a satisfaction she had never experienced before. "Oh, and Camilla," Amber approached her one last time. "Thank you for the invitation. It was revealing." Amber left the hall with her head held high, aware that she had changed everything. Not just for her and Nicholas, but for all the people who had been deceived by the Valentine and Beaumont families over the years. When she reached the hotel where she was staying, she found dozens of missed calls from Nicholas. She called him immediately. "Amber! Thank God! I'm seeing the news. Are you okay?" "I'm okay. Better than okay. What did you do?" What needed to be done? There was a long pause. Amber, do you realize what this means? It means the truth finally came out.